Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express-News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter,
investigative reporter Brian Chasnoff,
business editor and columnist Greg Jefferson.
And we're recording this on September 21st, 2020, and the big news in the country is the passing of one of the monumental figures in the history of the American judiciary, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died on Friday at the age of 87. I think she had many health challenges over the past couple of years, and in some ways there was some expectation that this sad day would be coming, but it obviously shocked everyone when it happened. And in what was already an extremely turbulent election season, we have one more bit of uncertainty thrown into it, which is that President Donald Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell are insisting that they're going to have a vote on the Senate floor before Election Day for the nominee to replace her, and that's. I think we're going to have all kinds of havoc, and one of the elements to this is the fact that there's a possibility that there will be legal challenges to the election results, and if it reaches the Supreme Court as it did in the year 2000, we could potentially have a deciding vote that was installed in the final days before the election itself. So this is territory that we haven't been on before, and it's going to be we're heading for a lot of uncertainty. But while we're talking about the election, we've got someone today who's joining us who is probably about as qualified as anyone in San Antonio to talk about what's going on this election season and what's been happening in recent years. We're joined today by Ryan Garcia, who has been involved in so many difficult and successful campaigns over the past few years. He managed Trey Martinez Fisher's return to the state house, a really tough election for him in 2018. He managed the campaign of Ana Sandoval when she defeated an incumbent in 2017. He's worked on campaigns for Sheriff Salazar, Justin Rodriguez, Roberto Trevino. The list goes on, and he played a critical role in Ron Nirenberg's reelection last year. So, Ryan, we want to thank you so much for joining us. It's really good to have you here.
No, of course. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, or for allowing me to join you guys. And you list all those names off. It's almost like I have my own quorum. I gotta be careful.
Have you ever gotten them all in the room together, like all the people that you've worked for?
Yeah, I don't know if we're allowed to. I think we gotta put out public meeting agendas and stuff if we do that. So we gotta be careful.
There's so much to talk to you about, but I wanted to start because you're heavily involved in at least a couple of races that I know. One is managing the campaign of Sheriff Salazar. We can talk about that later on. But you're also working on the campaign for Mayor Nirenberg's workforce development proposition, and I wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on how you're approaching that campaign. What you feel the overriding message is to voters for whom this is. They're still in the process of learning what this is all about.
Right. We're sort of just talking about, all these sort of things that I've been a part of in the city, right? And I feel fortunate I've been able to be a part of, some cool things. But all of those elections are about, helping people who you just got to hope and pray and cross your fingers are going to do a good job when they get there, right?
Right.
And this is probably, at least for myself, the most, I think, important and monumental thing that I've been able to work on. And, this is something that if approved, we're going to be able to go out and touch and see the 40,000 people and the 40,000 families that thing is going to help, right? That this is going to help. And so, I think it's just important for people to understand, the things at play that have resulted in San Antonio being in the place that it is right now with regards to its its workforce and education level and our ability to attract, the types of industries that pay high paying jobs, and how something like this can really just improve our stance and our position on all of those things, right?
Hey, Ryan. So the program itself, it's initially funded with about $75 million in CARES Act funding, and it's being paid for by the city and county. It got off to a really rough start. They started taking applications August 31st, and basically the phone system crashed and was a problem for about 2 weeks. How much damage do you think that did heading into the November election? I mean, it seems like if voters were kind of soft on it or unfamiliar with it, to read about the problems just in getting people signed up, that seems like it would be a real problem for voter confidence. Is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's no one wants to see hiccups in a program roll out as we're sort of trying to educate people and tell them why it's important and why, it's going to work. Not very reassuring, I think somebody wrote. But,
I don't know who you're talking about. Anyway.
We're living in a world, in a city where we spent the past sort of 6 months, 9 months, just kind of adapting, right? And figuring out what the new normal is, figuring out how to, adjust our lives and adapt. That's not unique to just, people's everyday life since the pandemic, right? I mean, we're trying to get a program off the ground that's going to help 10,000 San Antonians. And we're doing it in a pretty short time frame, right? And we're trying to adapt in this new world just like everybody else is. So yeah, I understand if someone who's sort of on the fence and thinking about, is this thing really worth it? Is it going to work? And then they see that, it's had a little bit of a bumpy rollout. Sure, you can understand why that might give somebody pause, right? And saying, I'm going to direct some of my tax dollars to this program. But I also think that people understand that what we're trying to do and on the scale that we're trying to do it and its ability to really affect transformative change in this community. If there's a couple hiccups with online links and maybe phones are jammed up for a little bit, I think people will understand that that's worth, sort of going through that little obstacle for a little bit and allowing for adaptation to take place, because the benefits and the payout of this program are going to be just so transformative, right?
But you're also asking people to approve something that, to some extent has not been proven. The current CARES Act program is supposed to help about 10,000 people, but it's not supposed to do that through until, September 2021. And, this program or this initiative is asking people to pony up $154 million for something that they haven't seen the results of yet. So how do you make that pitch to voters?
Right. Well, no, we haven't seen this type of utilization of CARES money for workforce development in this way, right? But in the city, there's organizations that have been doing workforce for a long time, right? And part of the workforce campaign, part of what we're going to be doing is highlighting some of the stories of people who live and breathe right next to us, right? That have experienced and their families have experienced what workforce development and training can do to change people's lives, right? But sure, we're sort of trailblazing this, right? Asking people to pony up $154 million for a program that, we haven't really seen the benefits of, and we're kind of just hoping that it's going to work, right? But this is a plan that's well designed. It's a plan that is training people for jobs that are in demand in San Antonio, right? We're not going to be training people for jobs that they're not going to be able to find once they get there. And this community also has a history of understanding the importance of investment, right? We did this 8 years ago when we put money in pre-K. That was a trailblazing thing too. We didn't have any type of benchmark to measure what it looks like when a city invests in early education, early childhood development. We didn't know what that looked like. We had a history of those types of programs in the city, right? And like Head Start and things like that. But that was sort of a trailblazing thing. And this community said, you know what? It's worth the investment. And I think 8 years later, the pre-K is doing its own campaign, and those guys got a lot easier job than we do, right? Because we've seen the benefits. We've begun to see the benefits, right? And the payout. And we understand, we might not see these things tomorrow or next week or even next year, right? But in a city that faces generational economic gaps, right? It's going to take sort of generational change to make lives better in this community. And I'm hopeful that, we live in a city of people that understand the importance of investment.
Ryan, have you run into any major opposition to this from any other organizations or groups who are really mobilizing against it?
I haven't. I haven't seen any of that, and I think, maybe that's certainly there are questions about where we're redirecting the money from, right? I mean, that's sort of like the elephant in the room, right? We're taking money from Aquifer Protection. We're not taking money, but we're changing the way that we're funding Aquifer Protection, right?
Right.
And we won't be
taking it away from Aquifer Protection.
Right. We're not right. Of course, the council just approved a plan, right, that makes permanent, the protection plan for the aquifer. But I haven't seen any type of organized opposition. But that doesn't mean that we're not operating with the sense that we're behind and people need to understand, right? And maybe there's a little bit of an information gap, and so that's what the campaign is working on every day, is to close.
Hey, Ryan, did you feel like the mayor and city council had to address funding for aquifer protection? In other words, set up some kind of funding scheme ahead of the election in order to kind of safeguard the workforce development proposal?
Well, I think it absolutely, the city understands the importance of protecting the aquifer, right? And that's why, for 20 years, we've been approving this thing. Voters have said 4 times now that this is a program that they care about and want to prioritize. And so I don't see a better reason than that to make it a permanent fixture of the city's budget, right? But certainly, if I'm a voter and I know that the plan is to change the allocation of sales tax funding from aquifer protection to workforce, then, I'm going to feel more comfortable knowing that there's a permanent plan in place to make sure that program that I care about is protected and continues. And the council has done that, and the mayor's done that.
Yeah, I've heard that there Build SA has some recent poll results that were pretty favorable. What can you tell us about that poll? Absolutely nothing.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. No one's listening, really. It's
we've got it's just our parents listening to this. So
you're good. You're good.
Friends and family. That's it.
Yeah,
it's a safe space for you, Ryan.
I don't think there's anything in that polling that would surprise any of us or wouldn't underscore what we're already talking about, right? That workforce development is something that I think once people understand what it is and how it can, again, change people's lives, that's not a hard time they have supporting, right? Our job is just to make sure that people understand what the plan is, and they understand how it's important. And they understand that we've also taken care of the other obstacles that may have been giving people pause about supporting this, right? Like protecting the aquifer.
Yeah. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be back in a minute. Okay.
Are we supposed to be quiet in this break? Or?
No, it doesn't matter. All right, we're back. And Ryan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, there, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a really unique election cycle. And, there have been questions about whether the mail system will be able to deliver mail votes in a timely manner. There are questions about whether we have enough polling sites available, whether we're going to have enough poll workers available as we're dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you, as someone who's really involved in a couple of campaigns right now and has probably never seen anything like what you're experiencing right now, do you have any concerns about this election coming off okay, specifically in Bexar County?
We live in a state where there is a party that is actively trying to keep people from voting, in the ways that feel most safe and easy. So that's always a concern when you're on my side of the aisle, right, in Texas. But I also think that there's just so much heightened interest in this election because people really understand what the stakes are, right? We've been talking a lot this election, maybe more than ever, like vote like your life depends on it, right? And I think people understand that. And my understanding is the elections office began sending out mail ballots late last week, which is much earlier than we're typically see them, send them out in advance of early vote starting. And I think that's just because we're expecting there to be heightened interest in the mail ballot vote, right? And I think absolutely I think we might expect to see those ballots hit the elections office a lot sooner than they're used to, right? Because there's anxiety about delivery times and the post office's ability or even willingness to make sure that we're doing what they need to do to get the ballots there on time, right, and counted. So I am concerned, that there is, kind of trouble there. But I also think that people are ready to meet the challenge, right, and get prepared and make sure they're doing what they need to do to get their votes counted.
Everyone I've talked to about you always cites, your skill when it comes to field organizing. And that was a role that you played in Mayor Nirenberg's reelection, which is a really tough campaign that he had against then Councilman Greg Brockhouse. And you came aboard during the runoff campaign. When we talked a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned that that was probably the biggest challenge or the most challenging campaign that you were a part of. Can you talk a little bit about what made that a particularly difficult one?
I guess it's runoffs are just sort of inherently kind of difficult, particularly when that's when you're coming on the team, right? But also, I think the stakes were just so high, and we were up against, kind of a perfect storm of events that made the mayor's reelection effort really difficult. And of course, you had someone in Greg Brockhouse who, right, wrong, or indifferent, spent, the better part of his term on council preparing for a mayoral campaign, right? And so certainly, and then you, of course, you had Chick-fil-A going on in the middle of that election, which created this whole other, added this whole dynamic to the election, right? That was particularly favorable to the mayor's opponent. So I think all of those things, contributed to its relative difficulty, right? But yeah, I'm glad that it went well.
Were you mainly concentrating on, like, when you were like out, working doing the field work for the campaign? Was your main focus like the South Side, or was there a particular part of the city that you were helping sort of fortify for the mayor?
Yeah, Gilbert, I usually charge people for these questions to answer these questions. I'm just joking.
I mean, we should have talked about that before.
No, I will say that we had the benefit, right, of the November proposition data to really hone in on what our message was going to be, right, and where it was going to be most effective. We had, the benefit of seeing where, the proposition that was sort of going to limit the council's power, right, and lowering the threshold for petition signatures. We had the benefit of knowing where the pockets of town were that really just were not expressing confidence in their elected officials, right, and the pockets where maybe they were. So, I think when you have, that was for data people, right? I mean, there's a lot to mine there, right?
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you on this, but that's really interesting because it suggests to me that the proposition campaign that the mayor had to deal with in 2018, which was probably a big headache for him, that in some ways it was helpful to his reelection campaign. Is that fair to say?
I think it would be fair to say, yeah. I mean, it absolutely helped our calculus, right? It helped us identify the places where we needed to shore up people's confidence in their elected officials and just clue them into the work that was really going on, and not being distracted by the kind of Chick-fil-A type issues that populist kind of candidates like the mayor's opponent at that time can really take advantage of to sway people's minds.
Right. Are those the same areas that you're going to have to hit for the November election? Are these the same areas that you're worried about, being on board for this sales tax initiative?
I'm really not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it will be a part of our calculus, right? Without saying too much about what we're doing. I'm sure, that's again, that's helpful data for anyone who's in my business to be looking at, right?
Hey, Brian, you had a question, right?
I was just going to ask Ryan, how much do you think that expunged police report played a role in that, in Ron's favor in that election?
I'm sure that was, a big part of some people's, ultimate decision when they went to go vote, right? It was clear that here was a guy who was, talking about accountability and transparency and integrity in office, right? And he had sort of, demonstrated that he wasn't being 100% truthful. And so I think that absolutely, helped voters understand what the choices were in that election, right? And, I think they made the better choice.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Gilbert.
I'm sorry. I was going to shift to the sheriff's race, and you got a kind of a unique situation here with Sheriff Salazar. He's got an opponent, Jerry Rickoff, who has no law enforcement experience, but he's had a lot of political success in Bexar County, winning many elections as county clerk. When you look at how you're messaging that campaign, is the primary focus on Sheriff Salazar's record, or is it the fact that his opponent is somebody who lacks experience in that field? Are you leaning more toward one approach or the other?
It's definitely a part of the messaging, right? And I think your paper, sort of almost entirely based their endorsement of the sheriff on that, right? But, I think in the sheriff, you also have a guy who ran for office promising to make that agency a more professional, more accountable, more transparent agency, right? And even when it's not in his best political favor, when it's not the most politically expedient thing to do, he's always been as transparent, as he can be. And I mean, and he's made a point to really raise the stakes in that agency. And of course, it's no secret that, he frequently is handing termination papers to people who were arrested in his agency. He takes very seriously, increasing the quality and the caliber and the character of the people that wear that badge, right? And I think voters will understand that it takes more than 4 years to sort of change a culture there, right? And certainly someone like his opponent, who was secretary of the paperwork, mayor of the paperwork in the county, maybe isn't qualified for the job.
Is that how you're describing Jerry Rickoff to voters, as a secretary of paperwork?
I it's a very important job. They get to sign their names on a lot of things, but he's the mayor of the paperwork right now, and I think it takes a little bit more experience to run the sheriff's office.
I'm just going to guess you're not going to get much work from candidates for county clerk anytime soon. Probably not.
But I'm a big fan of the current county clerk, and I think she's doing an amazing job.
Yeah. Well, before we let you go, I wanted to just ask you, put you on the spot a little bit, because when we talked a while back, you did mention that at some point, and I don't know how distant this would be for you in the future, but that you do have some thought about maybe running for office yourself. There's some people who do what you do, who they have a career and they're working on other candidates, other people's campaigns, and you indicated that you might be interested in serving yourself at some point. Is there, when you look at it, I mean, is there a particular office or area that would be most appealing to you?
Wow, I guess you are really putting me on the spot, huh?
I know this is a question you don't want to answer, but
without creating for myself prospective opponents, I think when I was really young, and that's sort of the public face that you see of politics, right? And these people who get elected, and we talked about how I sort of came to this realization that there's this whole infrastructure of people behind the scenes, right? And so getting involved in that capacity was really exciting to me. And I think, as I used to really put a premium on the importance of getting, elected and running for office when I was really young.
Yeah.
And I think there's value in gaining some life experience and learning more about the world and making yourself better able to serve, if you ever decide that you want to put yourself in a position to ask people to allow you to. I don't know that there's a particular office that excites me more, than the other. I sort of cut my teeth in the legislature, right? And that was my first introduction to, politics, and those were my first political gig. So, I have an affinity for that building and the people who work there and the work that gets done there. But, we also talked about how different and, in a sense, more rewarding the work that I was able to do, as a council aide was, right? And that, people come and they say they've got real issues that's affecting their quality of life every day. And when you're able to do things to improve that person's life, right? And you're able to reach out and you can see that person and tell them hi. That's a little bit more real and fulfilling in some ways than the work that goes in Austin, right? Where you're sort of you're working on these things that sound good and they're supposed to work, and you kind of got to wait and see, right?
Mm-hmm. True.
So yeah, I to answer your question, I'm not sure that there's one office that excites me more than another, but certainly being able to serve in that capacity, I could get really excited about.
Got it. Well, on that note, I think we'll end things. Ryan Garcia, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
And for everybody listening in, thank you so much. And Hope everybody's doing well, and we'll be back with you next week. Take care.